With just a bag of someone else's urine, he transformed from a lowly janitor into a man admired by thousands. Every day, all he had to do was strap that prepared urine bag to his thigh, inject another person's blood into a fake fingerprint film, and stick it tightly onto his index finger. Just like that, he became a valid man with top-tier genes, even charming the most beautiful supervisor at the company. But no one knew the truth. He was actually an invalid with inferior genes. He had stolen the identity of a genius, and to cover it up, he cleaned every bit of dead skin off his body daily, even scrubbing the gaps of his keyboard. But one day he slipped up. He left behind an eyelash. The story takes place hundreds of years in the future, when humans had mastered genetic engineering and created the most ideal form of birth. Not only could gender be chosen, but even hair and eye color could be customized. Vincent, however, was different. He was conceived naturally by accident. At birth, just one drop of his blood condemned him. The nurse declared he had a 60% chance of neurological disorders, a 42% chance of bipolar disorder, and a 99% chance of heart disease. When his parents heard his predicted lifespan was only 30 years, his father decided against naming him after himself and instead called him Vincent Anthony. This typical invalid was so frail that even kindergarten refused to accept him. But his parents weren't ready to give up. They decided to have another child, this time through genetic engineering. His younger brother, at just 8 years old, was already taller than Vincent at 10. Vincent refused to give in. He challenged his brother to swim races every day, but the results never changed. He couldn't match the speed or stamina of genetically perfect genes. From childhood, Vincent dreamed of becoming an astronaut. He studied space science relentlessly, but his father crushed his hopes, saying his weak genes meant he could only ever work at the Space Center as a janitor. As harsh as it sounded, his father wasn't wrong. No matter how much Vincent studied, interviewers never looked at his resume. They only handed him a cup for a urine test. His inferior genes erased all his possibilities, but everyone underestimated his courage to defy the rules. One day, he made a decision. He challenged his perfect brother again. This time, something unbelievable happened. His brother ran out of strength first. Vincent dragged him back to shore and won. That victory hardened his resolve to chase his dream. Right in front of his brother, he picked up his suitcase and walked away from the family that had only brought him sorrow. Just as his father predicted, he ended up at the Space Center as a janitor. But Vincent swore he would become the first invalid to fly into space. To get into that office building at all, he had to risk everything, because even the first finger prick blood test would expose him. He knew the rules of this world too well. Hard work alone would never be enough. So he turned to an extreme solution. He found an underground broker who specialized in forged identities. The broker had the perfect candidate. The valid man was Jerome, a former Olympic swimmer who had been paralyzed in an accident and fallen into despair. Jerome agreed to let Vincent take his identity in exchange for financial support from Vincent's salary at the Space Center. So the transformation began. Vincent couldn't risk corrective eye surgery that left scars, so he wore tinted contacts to look more like Jerome. After cutting his hair, he even started to resemble him. But the real challenge was that Jerome was 10 centimeters taller. Even elevator shoes weren't enough, so Vincent endured brutal bone-lengthening surgery. Seeing this determination, Jerome started to respect him. Even with perfect genes, Jerome had only managed an Olympic silver medal. He wondered how someone with defective genes could dream of reaching space. And in the distance, a rocket launching into the sky symbolized the beginning of Vincent's journey. On interview day, using Jerome's urine, Vincent passed the screening. Before long, he became one of the most sought-after stars at the Space Center. But he never let his guard down. Exposure meant ruin. Every day, he cleaned hair off his workstation, stuck Jerome's hairs into his comb, sprinkled Jerome's dandruff, and carefully disposed of his own skin flakes and hairs. All the while, Jerome supplied him with blood, urine, and hair. Eventually, the perfect version of him was chosen as an astronaut. His courage and persistence even impressed Jerome, once a celebrated genius himself. But just as Vincent thought his dream was about to come true, disaster struck. A supervisor was murdered and the rocket launch was postponed. For once, Vincent's caution failed him. He left behind one of his eyelashes at the scene. During the police's sweeping investigation, they traced the DNA back to him, identifying him as an invalid janitor from years ago. Suddenly, the man who had vanished was the prime suspect. The director, looking at the photo, didn't realize it was his top astronaut. Worse, the police noticed Vincent on a nearby treadmill. He panicked, pulled off his heart monitor, and quickly left. But he couldn't cover it forever. His face resembled the photo too closely. In his panic, he carelessly tossed a water cup he had used to the old janitor. He knew he couldn't sit and wait for exposure. Worried, he turned to Irene, who was helping with the investigation. But Irene looked at him with guilt and apologized. She had noticed this rising star before. He was too clean. She had never seen a valid man that obsessed with hygiene, so she secretly took a strand of his hair after work. But it turned out to be Jerome's, carefully planted by Vincent. The test results, of course, were flawless. Still, the next morning, his old photo was released with a bounty for his capture. Even though his altered appearance had kept Irene and the director from recognizing him at first, Vincent knew it was only a matter of time. The thought of being exposed crushed his spirit. Jerome tried to comfort him, saying, "They won't recognize you. I don't even recognize you. They'll never believe one of their elites fooled them this long." But the words didn't work. Overwhelmed with fear, Vincent threw the stored urine into the toilet and was ready to dump the blood supply to run. Jerome, furious for the first time, reminded him that while Vincent used his genes, he was also carrying his hopes. With perfect genes, Jerome had only won silver. But Vincent, with defective genes, had reached the top of the space program. They had already become one, and leaving Earth had become their shared dream. Persuaded, Vincent regained his courage. He began to show himself openly, even inviting Irene to a concert. He believed that the more visible he was, the less suspicious he'd look. Over time, the two grew closer. But Vincent hadn't expected the police to tighten security. Driving home, they ran into a police checkpoint. When he saw their inspection methods, Vincent calmly pulled out his contacts and tossed them aside. When they tried to collect DNA from his mouth, he quickly said, "I'm a germaphobe. I don't want to give you a contaminated sample." You get it. Using the fake blood under his fingertip, he tricked them and avoided detection. But once the police let them go, he knew a new test was waiting for him. Irene pulled the car over and told him she would take him to a special place before sunrise, then walked straight into the busy traffic. But Vincent, without his glasses, was practically blind. He couldn't make out the cars rushing past. Yet to keep his identity from being exposed, he had no choice but to gather his courage and cross. Irene then brought him to the massive steel launch pad before the sun came up. Even though the structure carrying her dream was just a blur in Vincent's eyes, his own hope burned as strong as ever. But a greater danger was closing in. The paper cup he had once handed to the janitor was tested again, and it revealed his true identity. That meant the invalid suspect hadn't left at all, and was very likely hiding inside the space agency. This time, the police decided to step up the search. They planned a surprise round of venous blood draws inside the agency. Unlike finger pricks, Vincent couldn't use his fake fingerprint film to escape. He had to take a huge risk. When the chance came, he pretended to flinch from the needle, and while the doctor and officers were distracted, he swapped in Jerome's blood that he had prepared. The results, of course, came out perfect. Seeing Jerome walk out cleared, Irene was overjoyed. Maybe she had been overthinking. Surely this perfect man with flawless genes would launch into space in 2 days without issue. Vincent, relieved to have dodged danger again, had no idea his date with Irene that night would mark the beginning of his downfall. After leading her onto the dance floor, the police suddenly carried out another raid in the middle of the citywide manhunt. Caught off guard, Vincent grabbed Irene and rushed for the exit, only to find the back door blocked by officers too. With no choice, he knocked one out and pulled a confused Irene into a corner. The police then knew they had their man. It was only then that Irene realized the man she loved, Jerome, was actually the wanted invalid. But once she understood, she loved not the genetic code but Vincent himself, his courage and sincerity. She couldn't resist him any longer. She made up her mind to protect him and help him escape Earth. Meanwhile, the young detective had already narrowed in on Jerome, yet when his superior asked for proof, he quietly switched off the screen. Soon after, Irene saw him searching Vincent's seat and quickly warned Vincent to leave the office. He caught her hint and left right away, but Irene was intercepted by the detective. Even though she insisted Jerome was bedridden at home, the officer demanded she take him there. This was the gravest danger yet. Vincent called Jerome immediately, explaining everything. This time, Jerome had to play himself again. Jerome stared at the stairs leading to the second floor and hurled himself down. Once, with a strong body, he had won an Olympic silver medal by giving everything he had. This time, for their shared dream, he put in that same desperate effort with only his arms. When the doorbell finally rang, he had managed to drag himself into the leather chair, crossed his legs, wiped away the sweat, and told Irene, "Sweetheart, where's my kiss?" Irene hesitated, then kissed him. Jerome's calm performance was flawless, but the relentless detective insisted on a venous blood test, one that couldn't be faked. He ran the test on the spot, but the result, of course, disappointed him. Still, seeing Jerome's nervous glance toward the stairs, he felt the truth was within reach. If he went downstairs and found the wheelchair and all the evidence, everything would collapse. But at that exact moment, he received a call saying the real suspect had been caught. It turned out the murdered project supervisor had been killed by the agency director himself. He couldn't tolerate subordinates standing in the way of his space program, so he silenced him. Late that night, Vincent went alone to the office and saw the detective's lonely figure. He was none other than his younger brother Anton, born with perfect genes. Anton knew how hard his brother had worked to get here, but as a cop, he believed Vincent's deception was a serious crime. He promised to help Vincent avoid punishment, but only if he gave up his dream of space. Deep down, Anton had never let go of the race he lost years ago. He still wanted to prove himself. So, on the eve of the launch, the brothers returned to the seaside where they had once raced. They would have one last swim. Though it was night and they could easily lose their way, neither of them held back. They swam farther and farther, unable to tell where the shore was. In the end, the perfect Anton was once again defeated by his invalid brother, who dragged him out of the water. Anton couldn't understand how an invalid could beat him, but for Vincent, as long as he could see the stars, he had limitless strength. Genes didn't matter. Right before the launch, Vincent no longer needed Jerome's samples, but Jerome believed Vincent would return and had prepared enough for a lifetime. He said, whenever Vincent needed them, he would still be there because he too was about to journey somewhere far. Then he told Vincent, I only lent you my body. You lent me your dream. He handed Vincent an envelope to open only after liftoff. They exchanged a smile, more like brothers than ever. Confident, Vincent headed to boarding, never expecting a last-minute urine test for the astronauts. Unprepared, he laughed bitterly at fate. He knew his dream was about to die one step from the finish line. He handed over his sample, and the result was, of course, invalid. But the doctor smiled and said, for future reference, right-handed men don't hold it with their left. Don't miss your flight, Vincent. The chief doctor had seen through his disguise long ago, but never exposed him, because his own son idolized Vincent and was also an invalid beaten down by life. Vincent carried not just Jerome's dream, but theirs too. With this spark of humanity, he finally boarded the rocket. At the same time, Jerome used his arms to climb into his own launch pad. He hung the silver medal that had once shamed him around his neck, and without regret, pressed the incinerator switch. As the rocket soared, the metal glowed with golden light in the flames. In space, Vincent opened the envelope. Inside was Jerome's hair, carrying both his and Irene's dreams, finally reaching the stars. Released in 1997, Gattaca is more than just a sci-fi movie. It is a profound fable about humanity. Vincent, a naturally conceived man with flaws, represents
the purest human drive. He gave up everything, even his identity, for his dream. Human potential cannot be measured by genes. The power of spirit can surpass any physical limit. Leave your comments, and I'll see you in the next video.